Welcome to Mythic Threads, where we unravel the mysterious, explore the supernatural, and take you on a journey into the cultural beliefs that shape communities. I'm your host, Serena, and joining me today is our guest star, Brian.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, we're happy to have you here. Today, Brian and I are going to discuss something really unique and intriguing. We're diving into the work of a fascinating ethnographer, James Sharp, whose research has provided invaluable insight into the Chipewyan people. We're going to talk about how the Chipewyan stories, including Bigfoot, known to most as Bigfoot, connect to survival, community, and their understanding of the world, and also about how it fits in with Stedman and Palmer's book, The Supernatural and Natural Selection, Religion and Evolutionary Success. You'll probably hear me reference them a lot.
I'm really excited to hear more about this. I know Bigfoot is a huge part of pop culture, but I didn't know that different communities have their own takes on the creature, and the way these stories shape their behavior and connect them to each other, it's more than just campfire stories.
Exactly. So let's get into it. James Sharp was an ethnographer who worked primarily in northern Canada during the early 20th century. His fieldwork focused on indigenous groups, especially the Chipewyan. Sharp became one of the leading voices in documenting their cultures, traditions, and way of life at a time when these communities were undergoing massive cultural shifts. What makes Sharp's work so significant is that he took the time to directly engage with these communities, spending time with the people he studied and carefully documenting what he observed. His research offers us a glimpse into the daily lives of the Chipewyan, from their social structures to their language and cultural practices. Now, while Sharp's work has certainly been critiqued for some of the colonial perspectives typical of his time, it still serves as one of the most thorough records we have of the Chipewyan people. Without his efforts, much of this crucial cultural knowledge might have been lost to history. So when we talk about the Chipewyan today, a lot of what we know comes from Sharp's pioneering work.
Wow, that's really fascinating. It's amazing to think that Sharp was able to document so much about the Chipewyan people, especially considering how much we can learn from his observations.
I think so too. So the Chipewyan people live primarily around Great Slave Lake in northern Canada. They've got a tough environment, short, cool summers and long, harsh winters. For centuries, they've relied on hunting, fishing, and gathering for survival, especially the caribou, which makes up about 90% of their diet. But beyond survival, they have a rich cultural tradition based around stories. These myths and beliefs, like their stories about Bigfoot, are deeply woven into the fabric of their community.
So Bigfoot, or Bigfoot, isn't just a random legend for them. It's more integrated into their daily life and survival, right?
Yep, and that's where the concept of religious behavior comes in. According to Stedman and Palmer, religious behavior is defined as the communicated acceptance of another person's supernatural claim. Now, this doesn't just mean beliefs in gods or rituals. It can also refer to the stories and myths that people share, like the Chipewyan's belief in boogeymen, with Bigfoot being the most famous one.
Right, so when an elder tells a child a Bigfoot story, they're not just passing the time, they're passing on things like values or survival lessons, things that get accepted and internalized by the child.
Right. When Chipewyan parents and elders tell these stories, especially about Bigfoot, it's a way of communicating a shared belief system. And when the younger generation believes these stories, they're connecting with their elders in their community. This fits perfectly with Stedman and Palmer's definition. It's not just a superstition, it's part of their religion and cultural identity. By accepting these supernatural beliefs, the Chipewyan create unity within the group.
And that unity is built on shared values and teachings. Wow, so these myths aren't just random. They're guiding the next generation in how they should behave, right?
Yep, you get it. Stedman and Palmer define myths as traditional stories that contain supernatural claims that, like history, use the past to influence human behavior. The Chipewyan myths, especially about boogeymen, serve a dual purpose. They teach caution and respect for authority. In the harsh wilderness they live in, this caution can mean the difference between life and death. Elders tell the younger generation stories about the dangers that exist outside the safety of the community, like the boogeymen or the ever-watchful Bigfoot.
These myths are kind of like survival tools. They're lessons or warnings even about how to stay safe and keep the community strong.
Another fascinating aspect is how these myths evolve. Sharp documented how Chipewyan beliefs began to mix with outside influences. For example, a tourist named Corky introduced the idea of Bigfoot as it's known in Western culture.
Yeah, and the Chipewyan were just like, oh, we've got one of those too.
Yeah, the Chipewyan adapted the Bigfoot narrative to fit their existing beliefs. It's a great example of cultural blending.
So instead of losing their traditions, they're just kind of mixing them?
That's a perfect way to put it. This adaptation shows how resilient their culture is. Now let's talk about the idea of proximate and ultimate hypotheses when it comes to religious behavior. The proximate hypothesis is about how behaviors in the present moment help create unity within a group. For the Chipewyan, when a child repeats a story about Bigfoot, it's reinforcing the shared belief and the community's values. It creates bonds between distant kin and neighbors who might not be directly related but still feel connected by these shared beliefs.
So the story of Bigfoot keeps the group unified, helping them strengthen their relationships and build trust among one another. And that's really important when you're living in such a remote and challenging environment.
Yep. Now, the ultimate hypothesis is about how these behaviors help the group survive in the long run. These myths help teach cooperation and ensure the survival of the group through shared responsibility. By reinforcing social norms and cooperation, these stories make the community stronger and more resilient.
I see. So the ultimate goal of these myths is not just about getting along today, but also ensuring that the group continues to thrive for generations to come. By passing down these values, the Chipewyan are making sure they'll survive and endure, even in such a tough environment.
That's right. And when we apply this to myths, we see how they help with the group's social structure. Stedman and Palmer say that the proximate function of myths is about teaching the consequences of behavior, social or antisocial. In Chipewyan culture, the stories of Bekacho and boogeymen serve as a kind of moral framework. They teach respect for authority, warn against straying too far from the community, and encourage the cooperation necessary for survival.
So these myths work both as warnings and as social glue, helping the group stay united and focused on survival.
Exactly. And when you take a step back and look at it, the ultimate function of these myths is about teaching the consequences of behavior, both good and bad. For example, the way the Chipewyan community uses myths like Bigfoot to explain certain events, like death or violence, is really interesting. It serves as a way to process tough situations without directly blaming someone. It's a social fiction, as Sharp calls it, that helps explain difficult things in a way that keeps peace.
So when something tragic happens, like a death or a crime, rather than pointing fingers, the community might say it was the work of one of these supernatural beings like Bekacho. It allows them to process the event while maintaining harmony in the group. So instead of Bob stole my wallet, it was Bigfoot.
Yeah, pretty much. It's really interesting. And through these myths, the Chipewyan created a sense of shared identity. They don't see these stories as separate from reality, they see them as part of life. For them, figures like Bigfoot are real, just in a different way than we might think. It's not just about belief, it's about how these figures help the community function and navigate the challenges they face.
It's a really powerful way of looking at it. These stories aren't just myths or beliefs, they're woven into their reality, helping them manage fears, ensure safety, and maintain social order.
Exactly, and Sharp's ethnography shows us just how these myths have evolved over time. When outsiders like tourists introduce new ideas like the concept of Bigfoot, the Chipewyan integrate these stories into their existing belief system. This blending of old and new demonstrates how the Chipewyan adapt to challenges while still holding on to their traditions.
That's fascinating. So even though their culture is steeped in ancient traditions, they're also open to new ideas and interpretations. It shows a kind of cultural resilience and adaptability.
Exactly. And Sharp's ethnography was so valuable because he didn't just observe from a distance. He immersed himself in the community. He spent years with the Chipewyan, learning their stories firsthand and witnessing how these myths played out in their daily lives.
So you got to see how these myths weren't just abstract concepts, they were living, breathing parts of Chipewyan culture. They were actively shaping behavior and helping the community stay strong.
Exactly. And as we wrap this up, it's clear that the Chipewyan myths about Bigfoot or Bekacho are so much more than just legends. They're a vital part of the community's survival strategy, teaching lessons about caution, cooperation, and respect for the natural world. These stories are not just passed down for fun. They're essential to maintaining order and ensuring the long-term survival of the group.
It's amazing how much power a story can hold, and it's a great reminder that our own stories and beliefs shape the way we live and interact with the world around us.
That's true. Well, we hope you've enjoyed this deep dive into the Chipewyan people and their incredible stories. It's fascinating how their beliefs help keep them connected and resilient, even in the toughest conditions. We'll catch you next time. Thanks for tuning in.
See you next time.